if you want to go to our national convention, we do have scholarships available. So please, please, please go to, I'll post a website here in the chat, but go there and apply because you might be able to get something that can really help. Sticky are just tough situations. So Maya's going to share, and then Michaela. This could be with transitions. This can be with just awkwardness. While they're talking, if you have a situation that is tricky or you're apprehensive about, feel free to share it in the chat, and then those ladies can use their expertise and answer it, or at least give some suggestions. So, Maya, take it away.
Yeah, for sure. We kind of came in, sorry,
Sorry.
if that was me or not, but I'm from Burrell, and we pretty had some smooth sailing until it came to transition season for our chapter. And then we got into some pretty sticky situations. And the main kind of cause of all the conflict and complications with our chapter was people applying and showing interest in leadership positions, but then maybe some things in their personal or academic lives just didn't really coincide with the CMDA mission as a whole. And so that kind of put a strain on us as leaders as we were trying to find people to kind of fill our slots as we moved on. And especially for us in third year, you tend to move away. A select kind of group stays in Las Cruces, if that's where their hub or third year site is, but most of us move away. So it was really important that we wanted to find leaders to kind of keep the chapter alive. And that was where we kind of ran into issues was balancing. We want people to fill those slots and make sure that we still have an active chapter going on at Burrell, but we don't want leaders who might send the wrong message or people who aren't really truly living out the CMDA values and missions that are all important to us. And so that was where we came into some pretty sticky situations and some really hard conversations to have. Was kind of letting people know, like, hey, thank you for your interest, but XYZ. And so some of the main things that I took away from that situation was one, you're definitely not alone. Our leaderboard was kind of on the phone with Wes pretty much every other day, trying to figure this out, kind of asking his expertise and his advice on things. So that was one of the biggest takeaways I took away from the situation was you aren't alone and there's definitely resources available to you. I'm a student rep. There's lots of student reps in this call too who have kind of been through these situations who can help you through that and let you know, like, hey, this is what worked for me, and these are the things that we kind of relied on. We had kind of rules and expectations already listed out for our chapter, which was great. We kind of relied on that and used that as kind of our backbone, like, hey, these are the things we're looking for in leaders. And, that's what we expect. So we kind of use that as our expectation sheet when kind of ruling out who would be a good fit, but also using Wes when it kind of came to, putting our hands up and saying, we're not really sure where to go from here. He was an incredible resource as well. So that's one thing I would definitely recommend when dealing with some sticky situations. And then the second, and maybe even more important thing that I learned was consistency is really key, and especially being consistent and steadfast in your faith. Especially you want people to fill those roles, you want to keep the chapter alive, but you also don't want to kind of throw away what's important to you and what faith backbone you have. And so that was, it's obviously a hard topic when you feel like maybe someone's not fitting in those things or, they are at school, but then in their personal lives, maybe aren't upholding those values that you hold near and dear. So staying consistent and steadfast in that and being willing to kind of say, like, hey, I'm not willing to compromise our beliefs and our, kind of role as a chapter here on campus just to fill a slot. So that was the biggest thing, and it's definitely a challenge, but staying consistent in one, your expectations, but especially your faith when it comes to choosing new leaders. That was something that was really important for our chapter, and I felt like helped us out a lot. So those would be the two biggest things I recommend. Stay consistent in your faith, even when it's hard, but also don't be afraid to reach out for help because there's definitely some resources here and great people that can talk and kind of work it out through. So I'm sorry if there's any sticky situations, especially in transitions, but it definitely gets better. And God will always make a way and a path for our chapters. So those were kind of my experiences. So if there's any questions or comments or just things you want to pick my brain about, feel free. And I can share a little bit more if you think you might be going through a similar situation too.
Thanks, Maya. But let me turn it over to Michaela. Totally different uh, situations, but also tricky.
Thank you, Maya, and thank you, Wes. Yeah, so my name's Kayla. I'm in Oregon, which makes me in a sticky situation. It actually came up in our last group, was asked about it. But yeah, I would say I have a lot of the same advice as in Maya of staying strong with your faith and staying strong in your faith and trusting God and his plan. Because we can do whatever all of our efforts are for nothing if it's not what God's plan is ultimately. I think for me, kind of a little bit about the story is I'm at Western, which is in Lebanon, which is a small town in Oregon. We had a chapter apparently several years ago, but it had disbanded during COVID. And then when I came in, there were two second years at the time who had restarted our Bible study, which was an amazing community. We have like 6 to 12 people probably per week. We meet once a week. And then there was somebody in my class who had known of CMDA through an undergrad. And so that's how I got started. And we were able to get 4 of us who were convicted to restart the CMDA chapter at Western. So we re-signed the Constitution and got it recognized again. However, the current one of the co-presidents at that time when we signed it last year, greatly disagreed with CMDA's statement of faith and was not willing to integrate the Bible study with the CMDA because she felt like they had opposing goals. And so that definitely made a sticky transition there. Fortunately, this year, we have been able to integrate the two a little bit more. But there's been definitely sticky situations of lack of physician contacts in the area to kind of be our campus advisors or lead us through that. And then the most recent one is finding new first years, upcoming second years to take on leadership roles and just trying to trust God that he will bring the right people at the right time, knowing that we still have, fortunately, a couple months and that some of us who are in CMDA will be staying in the area. So I'm hopeful that God will use those connections to kind of be continuing to build the program. But I'm definitely more than happy to talk to anybody about trying to grow a CMDA chapter at your school or continue it after you. But I think, yeah, I mean, my advice is definitely the same as Amaya's. Talk to Wes. You have a ton of people who can support you both in your areas and nationally. Staying strong in your faith and just trusting that God will make a way for what the plan is.
Thanks, Michaela.
Yeah, so I think the most important thing in just setting expectations with leaders, the main thing that comes to mind is just like even Wes mentioning it at the beginning is pretty cool. But that whole idea of ministry of presence, I think, is crucial. And I think we've talked about it a couple of times, like in the different groups that I've been with tonight, but how crucial it is to build community and to kind of be there for one another. And I think just by doing so, that itself is an expectation for other people to show up. And as long as you as leaders are showing up, like you show the members, like consistency is what's going on here, and you really can build on that community. And I think from that, there's a lot of things that just flow out of that, which I have seen in our chapter for CMDA, and it's just been really awesome. Um, yeah, I think that's the main thing. If you let people know that you're there for them, they keep showing up for you and they keep showing up for your chapter. And they kind of take over their leadership position as well. Like one cool example I can think of right now is G, who's not here tonight, but she was the vice president for our chapter last year. And one thing for our vice president, like in their job description, was meeting with members whenever needed, providing that kind of mentorship whenever needed. And she would just do that on her own without me ever asking her to do it, or she would just meet with members who needed help. Like, I would find out about these things like, hey, I met with so and so for coffee, and they would tell me about it. And it was just really cool to know that she really took upon that upon herself and she just went for it without us even asking. But she knew that she was able to do that. And that if she needed anything, that she could reach out to us and ask for help in any of her responsibilities she needed to do. But I think just providing that kind of environment for your leaders will just allow them to step into their roles how they need to do it. And then when it comes to setting expectations for boards following you or whoever is coming in as a leader, it's kind of reminding them what we're about. And I think the biggest thing is community. As long as you're kind of building that community and continue to do so, people continue to show up. And I think that's just been the really cool thing that I've seen with our chapter. And what I would continue to tell people is you show up how your chapter needs you to show up. And I've heard different ways that people meet, which is awesome. Like Marat was telling us that you guys meet once a month for monthly dinners and also bi-weekly for student-led Bible studies, which is awesome. Like that community continues to build that way, but there's consistency in that. They do it once a month and twice weekly. For us in Colorado, it's every week. Billings also every week. They meet for Bible study that's student-led. And so just as long as you're showing consistency, people will show up for that. So I think that's my main thing to share with you guys tonight. So if you guys have any questions or concerns or anything like that,
I do
always.
think at first you were talking, I was thinking you're doing this for your whole group, but you're actually saying do this for the other leaders that you're leading with, which I think is an interesting differentiation. And then you snuck two words in there that I think may have shook some people because it did me, which was job description. Like how many people actually have a job description for leaders within CMDA? Like that's like that's pretty high. But I'll be honest, if you set what the expectation is, then you feel like you're achieving it, which I think can be a helpful thing too, if it's reasonable. So did you guys just come up with this? Like,
No, we had those when we started our roles. I don't remember, and Maddie and Kayla, you can step in whenever you want. But I remember reading those and we kind of talked about that a little bit at the beginning. And I told them, like, if there is anything on that list that you're like, I don't think I can do it, or I'd rather do this instead, kind of thing. Like, we had a little bit of that conversation at the beginning to kind of set us up for the year. But we did have a general list of uh, responsibilities that was passed down to us. And we've kind of modified it as needed and passed it down to our other boards. I could say that if you're the only person doing it, kind of focus on three main things that you want to do for your chapter, and just really run with it. Because if you try to do everything all at once by yourself, that's going to be super overwhelming. But if you can just really focus on like two or three different tasks throughout the year, I think that can make a huge difference.
it's really good. Other comments to that? Questions?
I have one question. With the roles and responsibilities, is that something that like student to student, you guys are kind of figuring out and holding each other responsible and talking about, or is that something that's more done between you and your advisors?
It's mainly student to student. Our advisors weren't really in the nitty-gritty of our job responsibilities. They were mainly there for support. And our advisors, like at least two of them, they were very heavily involved in like the bigger projects that we were doing. So yeah, the nitty-gritty stuff was just mainly between the board itself. And the advisors were there for support. Yeah.
Speaking as somebody who had like a more minor role in the club, I think it was very helpful because I had committed myself to the leadership on a different club prior to the CMDA like applications coming out. So just knowing this was what the treasurer was going to do, this is what the secretary's duties are. Like it was very helpful to be able to see that and be able to say, okay, I've already committed myself here for the next school year. These are the duties that are going to be like that they're expecting me to fulfill. Do I have the time commitment to be able to do that? Yes. Okay. So like having the job description written out was just really helpful to know. Like even when we were picking the incoming leaders, I was like, this girl, she like runs triathlons every weekend. She can't do that, like she's too busy. She's gonna fit much better into a different role. So it was just helpful to like be able to put people in a spot that really fit well with their lifestyle, especially.
Very cool. Couple of things that I saw as themes here. I heard the word consistency a lot by people. And I'll say consistency is important for on a number of different levels, but one of the things that was talking to somebody about recently was just consistency in what you can sustain your group. If you want to meet 3 times a week, which I know nobody does, you can't do that. It's just not sustainable. But if you want to meet once a month, okay, that might be sustainable, but do you want to push yourself to be a little bit to maybe go every other week, something simple. One group shared that, they weren't meeting every week. Uh, I don't even, it was once a month, but they had some sort of chat that was getting conversation going so that every week there was something being posted or something being engaged with that can be really helpful. So I think that even consistency, if you're meeting, too far a distance, if you have somebody who can consistently just do one thing a week, that is huge because it keeps it on their mind. It keeps it going there. The other thing I heard was just trusting God. And one group shared, basically God intervened with the hard situation or sticky situation. I think that's beautiful. And if we really do believe in prayer, I mean, that's the most we can do. So I think trusting God with stuff is a it shouldn't be surprising when we see him work. And that's a joy to be able to be part of. And then there were two other thoughts that I had before we break up into prayer. I have like notes I've been writing all this time. Um, yeah, the first one was look for next year's leaders now. Always be looking for who God might be putting in your path. And maybe they're not ready yet, but it's somebody you can build into. You could disciple, you can do it. I know some of you, like Ron Matthew, just kind of starting. Keep an eye on who could be next. I just think you have to think that way. Otherwise, the year's over. And you're like, oh, that'd be great if the year's over. I'm another year closer. But yeah, just keep that always on the front of your mind. And then the second is, I think it's so powerful to know each other's testimonies. How's God worked in your life? Whether that's last week or that's 6 years ago, what got you into medicine? Students ask or answer that question to get into school, but they don't answer it once they're in school. So you don't really even know people's stories. I think that's captivating, especially for leaders to share it. Really, really, really powerful. So look for other leaders, be consistent, and um, trust God and share what he's doing. I think those are some of the themes that I heard from you all. Thank you guys for taking the time. Hopefully this is worth it. And yeah, we'll be in touch soon enough.